How's it going, guys? Alex from 734 Speed here, and we're back at it today. Gonna put some more stuff on that Corksport motor, and hopefully by the end of this video we will be either dropping the motor in or getting really close to it. So first thing we're gonna do is install our Corksport pulleys. Alright, so the first thing we're gonna do is install our Corksport water pump pulley. Just goes right on the water pump here. Those 3 bolts get torqued down between 16 and 18 foot-pounds. Now that we got the pulley on, we can move on to, we'll do the idler next. I wasn't able to torque this down just yet. I'm going to have to wait until I get the belt on it, which will be when it's actually in the car. I know I wanted to get this all done while it was out of here and easy to access, but without the belt on, or even without any coolant, sometimes you can get away with the coolant building up pressure on the water pump side, but I'm not able to torque it down. The pulley just spins. So we'll skip over torquing that down and move on to the idler pulley next. Alright, so we got the idler pulley on. That gets torqued down to 18 foot-pounds as well. See, it just sits right there. Now, I did have to transfer over, obviously, the bolt, but there's like this little dish washer type thing, and then there is a plastic clip followed by like a, I don't want to call it a bearing because it doesn't move, but almost like a spacer, I guess. So those get transferred over from the stock pulley to the Corksport one. And the last one that we have to install is going to be the tensioner. Alright, so here's the tensioner. I figured it'd be easier to put it on the block, torque down the 2 bolts to 20 foot-pounds on this one, and then when it's on the block I can torque down the actual pulley to 35 foot-pounds. That way it's easier instead of wrestling with the tensioner and all that shit trying to torque it down. It's on the block and a little bit easier now. So we'll get that pulley on, and then that'll be it for today. I still need some more parts first. I gotta order some stuff from Mazda. We're getting a new knock sensor, new cam position sensor, and a new crank position sensor. Once those 3 things are in, I think I'll be ready to take this off the engine stand and mate it up with the transmission, throw the clutch on it, and get it in. So let's get that pulley on. Got the pulley on, everything's torqued down. Starting to look a little bit more like an actual engine. So pick back up probably later next week, closer to payday. I'll make that Mazda order and get the rest of the parts in so that we can finally get this bad lad thrown back in the car. So yeah, catch you guys in a little bit. Alright, so the next thing to do on the motor, now that I finally got my cam and crank position sensors in, is to install them. So got the cam sensor in. This just gets bolted down right here, and that gets torqued down to 7.5 foot-pounds. So next thing we'll do is we'll move on to the crank position sensor, which will go right here. And there is a certain amount of teeth that we have to count to align it. So I'll check that and get back. So aligning that crank position sensor is super simple. What you're going to do is count 20 teeth from this space right here and align the crank position sensor up with that 20th tooth. However, this has to be set to top dead center, which it did not from Corksport. So I have to order a timing tool kit so I can set this to top dead center and put my crank position sensor in. For now, I just put those 2 bolts in to remind me to do it later, but we're going to move on because it's time to get this block in. A couple days have gone by since last recording the last little bit of this. Unfortunately, it's been like a lot more than a couple days. Had to kind of put the build on hold, but we're back and we're ready to get this thing in. Now, what I'm going to do next is work on getting the trans all ready to get mounted up so we can just take this off the stand, waiting for a couple buddies to come over, help me out. And then she's going in today since we're kind of in a rush looking at another move here. So I got to be able to get this car able to at least roll onto a flatbed, so that when it's time to leave, that obviously I can't tow it with no axles or nothing in it. So it's time to get this thing moving. We got all the parts over here to at least get it in. We got the South Bend clutch stage 4 extreme. Over here we got our new throwout bearing, slave cylinder, pilot bearing, new clutch fork. This is a wear item. You are going to want to replace that. Flywheel bolts, and then obviously we have our motor mounts. The rear motor mount's still in. We got some high temp grease for all that stuff. And yeah, so let's get going on this. I did the other day take a wire brush to this trans and clean that all up. Definitely could use some more down the road, especially like when I go to replace the gaskets and seals in there, because that's leaking. But I'll worry about cleaning that up deeper later. I do still have to kind of clean up in here a little bit, just so that when I go to re-grease it, I don't get any of that shit anywhere. But I'm going to clean this up right now, and then what we'll do is we'll put the throwout bearing and that clutch release fork in there. I'll double check. I'm pretty sure there's already a pilot bearing pressed into the crank, but if not, we'll have to do that. And we should be ready to put the clutch and flywheel on here shortly. Alright, so got that all cleaned up now. Cleaned up the ball that sits on and the input shaft. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take our grease. Ideally you'd have Molly lube, but this is all the parts store around me had. It should work though. It's high temp. Yeah. So we're going to apply some of that to this stud right here, and then also to where the throwout bearing sits. Then we can also put it on the splines. Then what we'll do, we got to transfer the boot over from the old clutch release fork, put that on the new one. It'll just slide in, and yeah. Alright, so what I did is I coated all where the throwout bearing rides and the input shaft, and then this ball head right here with that high temp STP grease. Put a little extra on here because we can always take more off. We don't want to do too much, because if you get too much on it, it can fling off, coat your clutch disc, the friction surfaces, and then you get clutch slippage. So it's always better just to kind of like not overdo it. But yeah, now we're ready to get our clutch fork and throwout bearing on. Still got to transfer over the dust boot, but we'll get going on that. Alright, one thing I forgot to mention too is we are going to want to put grease in here, which obviously we did for the ball, but we're also going to want to get inside these clutch forks, inside there, to get some grease in there according to the manual. And then this obviously slides in right there, and it'll sit in like that. Alright, so we got the throwout bearing and the new clutch release fork in there. That was super simple. Basically, obviously the hook on the throwout bearing lines up with the hook on the clamp, or on the lever. This obviously just rotates like that. When your slave cylinder hits that, that's how you disengage your clutch. It just snapped on this ball here. There's this like spring that kind of holds it. And yeah, so now what we'll do is we'll take a clutch disc and slide it back and forth on this input shaft here, and that'll take off all the excess grease that we don't need. We'll get that out of the way just so that it's not getting flung up everywhere, and we'll be ready to put the clutch on the actual engine. Alright, so all I'm doing now is just taking this clutch disc, sliding it back and forth, and we can see just how much excess grease we pulled off. So I'll wipe that off and kind of clean up the outside of that a little bit, and we'll move on to the next step. Alright, never thought this day would come, but the engine is off the stand, and it does look like Corksport was nice enough to install a pilot bearing for us. So now I have an extra one just sitting around which is awesome. I didn't want to have to really press that in anyways. So now it's time to throw that flywheel on. And then, alright, so we got the new flywheel bolts that came with the South Bend clutch. These are going to get torqued down to 87 foot-pounds in a star pattern, and we'll probably do 2 or 3 laps around to get to that final torque, just to make sure everything's seated on there. Go ahead and use a non-petroleum based cleaner to clean off the surface of the flywheel. I still have to do that. Of course, make sure you have your pilot bearing and definitely your rear main seal installed. But yeah, so let's go ahead and throw this flywheel on. Alright, to give you guys an idea of how I'm torquing this down, since it's just me right now doing this, is I have one bolt in the bell housing there with this crowbar, which happened to be the perfect width to fit right in there. One claw sits on the gear, and then this part right here is just tucked nicely under the flange as like a leverage point, and then I'm able to torque it down. Started just going hand tight, 60 foot-pounds, and then 87 foot-pounds. So we'll finish up this flywheel and then finish up the rest of the clutch. Alright, so I went ahead and put on the clutch disc and the pressure plate, and then those 6 pressure plate bolts get torqued down to 20 foot-pounds. Keep in mind, each brand of clutch is going to be a little bit different on the torque specs and installation instructions. So this is just specific for this South Bend Stage 4 Extreme clutch. And yeah, so I'm just waiting for a couple buddies to get here to help me with mating the transmission to the engine, and then she's going in the car. So it's been sitting long enough empty without an engine in here. It's about time that we fill that back up. Long overdue. And I did forget to mention, this driver's side axle was a bitch to get out. Because I don't think this will be running anytime soon in the next few months, I'm just going to install it with that axle in there and not worry about putting the drive shaft shop axles in, because I just need to get this as a roller right now so I can get it to the new place and get it out of here. So yeah, let's continue on with this. Alright, so we made a ton of progress last night. I got the motor in. I wanted to film it, but I just got so wrapped up in having all the guys here, we just kind of went straight to work on it. But it's a new day. The hardest part with doing this was really just mating the trans up to the engine. It was just kind of awkward having it just sitting right here, being held up by the engine hoist. But that took about an hour. Once we got that in, putting the motor in wasn't bad at all. We started with the Damon passenger motor mount, kind of loosely got that in, got the motor into place with the rear motor mount, also Damon, and then put the Damon trans motor mount in, torqued them all down, and the motor's secure. It's good. We do have to retorque all those at like 300 or 400 miles, but we'll probably do it like 100 miles and then 500 miles. We'll just double torque it down. But yeah, this is where I'm going to end this video, because it's probably getting pretty long here. I don't know. Honestly, it's been going on for so long, I don't remember, because we had that long break in between filming. But yeah, in the next episode, we'll start just putting stuff back on. So thank you for watching. Please subscribe. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. Have a good one, guys.